For each person there is a place where he should be. For a farm, for a lord, his estate. For this girl who is a princess, the palace is such a place. Until now, that was what she had thought. The street was noisy, and many people had gathered. Some girl was yelling to be let go. A man came up to her and told her that it was too noisy, and to be outraged in moderation too. Then someone's voice spoke and said that the following charges were being issued to the sinner. Conspired by her mother, she impersonated that emperor for many years, thus tarnishing the name Baliop. Furthermore, even though she was saved by Princess Alencia's mercy, she had committed a despicable act out of jealousy of her, and also sowed enmity between the Mage Tower and the Empire, trying to cause international conflict. That's why the criminal Philomel deserves the death penalty. Suddenly someone in the crowd shouted to kill that fake princess. The girl asked how she even dared to pretend to be the emperor's daughter. At this point, Philomel wondered what she was even trying so hard to get love for, and putting so much effort into not losing it. After that she turned to her father and said that she wasn't pretending to be a princess. All this time she really thought she was his daughter. Her other mistakes are really enough to warrant the death penalty, so she won't be begging for mercy. But at least the fact that she switched with a princess as a child. But the man didn't let her finish, and he asked that they bring thread immediately and sew up her lying mouth. And then people in the crowd shouted for everything to be done as the emperor had ordered, and sewed her mouth shut. Philomel thought, what else could she expect somehow? Both the attachment and the place. None of it was hers. Gaining courage, the girl asked His Majesty if she had ever been a daughter to him, and someday he'd at least somewhat consider her his daughter. But that suddenly, a little girl came up to the emperor and told her father to stop, and they were on their way back. He told Alencia that they really didn't need to look any further, so they could leave. He then turned to the executioner and told them to bring about the execution of this one on their own. The ultimate one-of-a-kind villain, Philomel, who the only thing she was truly innocent of, overlapped with many of her atrocities, and she was eventually buried without ever seeing the light of day. But she was not allowed to die so easily. She had to die in agony under the executioner's blade, and there wasn't a single person who sympathized with her. This ending of the fake princess is very fitting for the villain. After reading these words, the girl closed the book and said that it just couldn't be. She couldn't believe they had done that, even though Philomel had made a mistake, but the death penalty was too much. This girl only read a book she found in the garden, but such is the content. She's very annoyed. She thought she shouldn't have opened it. She didn't understand what fake meant and what her real daughter was. She thought that right now she would tell her father everything, and it would be very bad for the person who wrote it. After calming down a bit, the girl thought that if her nanny saw such a thing, she would start cursing again. The title of this book is Princess Alencia, a mother with beautiful golden hair and green eyes, and the father is a blue-eyed brunette. The princess looks exactly like the empress. Also, Philomel is the real villain of the story. At that moment, the girl remembered what was written in the book. Some two girls were talking to each other. "Did you hear that?" one of them asked. "His Majesty, the Emperor, intends to pass the throne not to the princess, but to someone from the sideline. You know, because the princess is nothing like the empress who passed away. His Majesty loved his wife so much she's a daughter. He doesn't even pay attention. She was born after killing her mother, so His Majesty must blame her for everything. When my daughter tried to connect with him in any way, he would immediately request that she be taken away immediately." At that moment, the girl went to the mirror and thought that they looked very much alike. But then she realized that the only thing they had in common was their name. For starters, it describes the very real villain. The girl recalled a situation from the book when Philomel accused the maid of stealing the pendant and asked that she be killed. At this point, she thought, she'd certainly done that in a fit of anger, but she'd apologized afterwards. And this is all written by an uninformed person who just heard rumors. But then suddenly there was a knock on the princess's room, and the girl said she was already entering. Philomel told her to wait a little while. At that moment, she herself saw the closet where she was going to hide the book. When her nanny came in, that girl closed the drawer where she had put the book. The nanny came closer to her and asked her if she was doing stupid things again instead of studying. The girl was surprised and asked what other nonsense. She studied properly. When the nanny told Her Highness to grow up already, and if she continued to misbehave, she would put them all in a difficult position. His Majesty has ordered that her behavior must be corrected, and if all was well, she could dine with him this time. When the girl heard this, she said that the nurse was lying to her again. but she replied that it was a bad habit to doubt the words of the other person. Philomel thought that her father had never once kept his promise. Whether she listened diligently to her lessons or did well on an exam, her father, little to no praise, so he never even came to see her once. The nanny said she didn't even know who this girl was so mean about. Then the princess asked if she really didn't look that much like her mother. What I didn't get an answer to was that, surprisingly, yes, Mrs. Isabella was very intelligent and mature. All in all, she was a good person. Nanny then said that therefore, if Her Highness wanted to be like the late Empress, she would have to behave honorably at the country's foundation festival. When the girl heard this, she was surprised. She didn't think she would be allowed to go there. The country's founding festival is an annual celebration of the Balalope Empire, rumored to have received patronage from the sun goddess herself. It is a very important event, so each year the date is determined through an oracle. And on the appointed day, the imperial family, along with the aristocrats, gather at the palace to hear a celebratory speech. But there is one very important condition. The event must necessarily be held on a clear and sunny day. When the girl came out onto the veranda, she couldn't believe it was raining. The maid told her not to get too close or she would get wet. Then suddenly the girl heard a conversation. One of the emperor's aides said that apparently they needed to reschedule the event. They had been assured by the scholarly wizards that it wouldn't rain, but it didn't turn out that way. Philomel saw her father and his assistant. The man said they were also at a loss because their forecast was wrong for the first time. Then the emperor said that he understood everything and they had nothing left but to postpone it. He told him to set a new date and report back to him. Philomel thought that the events that were happening now were exactly the same as in the book. She wondered if the celebration would really be postponed. According to the contents of the book, Alencia wanted to attend a festival in the village this year, but due to a sudden downpour, it was rescheduled, and in the end, she never got there. That there were other incredible things described in the novel. So Philomel was justified in thinking that none of this had anything to do with reality. Well, what if everything really happens like in the book? If what's happening there doesn't happen to coincide with reality? If this whole story really is true? Then suddenly Philomel ran up through the rain to her father and told him not to do it. She asked that her father not reschedule the festival. A celebratory speech could be made inside the palace, so she asked that they conduct everything as planned. She looked at her father with a pleading look and asked him to think about it. But the emperor turned around and told them to leave already. Then the man wanted to say that the princess had a good idea, but the emperor looked at him angrily and asked, "Must he listen to this child's every whim?" The one who blocked the emperor's way just because he wanted to see the festival. The maid said for the girl to leave already, or they might catch cold because of the rain. But at that moment Philomel saw a boy standing nearby. He wanted to run up to her but was stopped. His father told Nazar that it wasn't the right time. When the girl returned home she was shivering from the cold. Then the nanny turned to the princess and told her that they would not get away with what had happened today. And from that point on, they go to a special control system. The maids just stood there and watched it. The babysitter was very angry and said the girl was naughty and could admit she was at fault for once. Philomel thought her chest ached much worse than where the blows from Nanny's whip had hit her. When the nanny left, the maids came to the girl and told her to sit down, and they would put ointment on her wounds. Afterward, one of them asked why the princess was doing that. Wouldn't it always be better to say in front of the nanny that it was her fault? Then she and they would be less hurt? At this point she began to dab the girl's wounds. Then the second maid, looking at Philomel's sad face, told her not to get so upset, because Nanny was a mood person, and she would soon calm down. Especially since they'd heard that the Empire Base Festival would be held in a week. By then, she'd calm down and let the girl take part. When Philomel heard this, she was surprised and asked why it took so long. As long as a week? Then the maid said that in saying this the high priest had fallen off the carriage on the way back. The second maid said that this had never happened before, and some even talk about whether the gods had turned their back on their empire. Then the second maid looked at her with an angry look and said, "How is it that people aren't afraid to say such things yet?" Philomel asked the maids to leave her alone. Then one of them said it was late, and that Her Highness should go to bed. How likely is it that the Empire's founding festival will be postponed, and are the chances of the book anticipating this high? The girl went to the closet, took out a book and thought it was not an ordinary novel, but a prophecy. Then it appears that Philomel is not the real daughter of Father Emperor Eustace. She's a fake. When morning came, Nanny came into the girl's room and told her to wake up already, because His Majesty summons her to him because of what happened yesterday. When the girl did not answer, the nurse asked what was wrong with her. Philomel opened her eyes and said she was sick and could not get up. The nanny asked if she was faking it again. But that trick wouldn't work today. If she was so scared, why would she do such a thing? The girl said she wasn't pretending, she was really sick. Then the nanny asked how many times she had missed school like that. And then she walked over to the girl, taking her hand, and asked if she really had a fever. Philomel dreamed of her execution, and realized it was only a dream when she opened her eyes. Sitting down on the bed, she wondered how much sleep she had gotten. She remembered Nanny's words that somehow, if she had a cold, she should take medicine and sleep, and she also brought her soup. She didn't understand why she had to act like this over some festival. In any case, she told His Majesty that she had a cold and wouldn't be coming. The maid asked if the girl understood that His Majesty would not grant indulgence on account of illness. Philomel knew all this, but she was just scared, because even in her dreams her father had not said a single affectionate word to her. If things continued as in the book, there was a chance that her father would kill her. The girl wondered, what if she continued to live a quiet life? Will she then be able to be the daughter he wants her to be, and even though she may not be real? But after spending 9 years together, won't he show her warmth? The girl thought that maybe then her future would change. She decided that she should check it out, so she's going to go and ask him right now, because she absolutely refuses to die like this. When she stepped out into the hallway, she thought it was as if his office was farther away than usual this time. The girl leaned against the wall with her hands and thought she was also dizzy. But then suddenly she heard voices not far away. When she came closer, she realized it was the servants' room. One of the maids said that Her Highness was causing a lot of trouble. The other one told her to be quiet because someone might hear them. The other maid said they're the only ones here. Besides, it's objectively true. The guy said that because Her Highness was always getting into trouble, they even had their pay cut. The maid resented that it was she who made the mistakes, and it was the nanny who scolded them the most. One of them said that if she were a princess, she would only receive love from His Majesty. Philomel was very surprised, for she saw even her knight Martin among them. When they first met, he said he would guard her with all his might, so she could take it easy. All the workers had been so nice in the girl's presence, but now it was as if they had lost their minds. The maid said she didn't like this Philomel at all. Besides, she doesn't have the divine power of the symbol of the imperial family at all, even though she's a direct heir. So she's only a member of the family on the outside. And yet he makes such a scene in front of aristocrats just because of his desire to see the festival. Yes, if this continues, the Duke of Ibridon's house will definitely break the engagement. If Her Majesty could read the atmosphere, the Emperor would love her. Philomel stopped listening to them and went. She thought that she should go to her father because her life did not depend on these people. So don't take their words so personally. It doesn't hurt her anymore. At this time in the Emperor's office, Aide Paulin asked if he could stop by for just a moment. The Emperor asked if he was being too pushy, but he said that Her Highness was sick after all. Wouldn't it be good to visit her? The Emperor didn't understand why his aide was so worried about it, because this girl was faking it again. But Paulin said that according to the doctor, this time she really had a serious cold. The Emperor asked, "And what's the big deal about some cold?" Paulin asked why he was so cold to his own daughter. She is his only blood after all. But the Emperor said he never felt it was his child. Paulin suggested that it might be because he still believed that it was the princess who was the cause of Madame's death. But the Emperor was very angry and told him to shut up. The aide bowed and said he was sorry. He didn't mean to hurt his feelings. Eustace said he'd actually thought about it once. Well, he used to. Now he doesn't feel anything at all. He never wanted it to fill the void of Isabella's absence. Even fulfilling the role of heir would have been enough for him. But there's still no progress. And then there's last night's indecent behavior. He can't get his hopes up. Paulin took that because Mistress is trying. It's just that she's only 9 years old. The Emperor said that if he thought making such a scene was an endeavor, then she was good with it. But Justice himself at that age was already engaged in a hidden struggle with his brothers. Paulin said that such things should not be compared because His Majesty has been outstanding since he was a child. The Emperor said that this girl looked nothing like Isabella or him. Paulin asked if the Emperor really felt no love at all for the girl. Justice replied that it was nothing, but right now he only expected her to live and not attract attention, and giving no cause for concern, as if it didn't exist at all. When the girl returned to her room, she lay down on her bed and did not understand how she should be now. Because at this rate, His Majesty will never forgive her in the future. Philomel thought that if she acted prudently from now on, would it preserve her life in the future? Maybe she should ask for help, but she didn't know who to ask because there wasn't a single person in this house on her side. She remembered the Emperor's words about never feeling like it was his child, and thought that she really wanted to live. When Philomel let her feelings out and calmed down, she decided to pull out the prophecy book and began to read. She thought this book might have a clue as to what she should do, a way that would definitely help her survive. According to the book, Philomel didn't die immediately after it was discovered that she was a fake. In fact, then Alencia felt sorry for her, and she let loose with a petition to the Emperor. But Philomel could not overcome her envy and jealousy. As a result, having repaid evil for mercy, the girl found herself back behind bars. Yet before her execution she managed to escape, albeit with difficulty, and did not die until after she was caught a second time. That's when the girl realized that she just had to escape before Alencia showed up. Sure, right now it's going to be hard, but she can do it. She should just get it. By that, the girl was referring to an object kept in the Balalop family, which the date had created for the Emperor and his descendants, and they called it the Ring of Prominence. With his help, the divine power of the sun goddess available to the members of the imperial family is transformed into energy through which different magic can be used. So, for example, you can use movement magic, which allows you to get where you've been at least once. The only problem is what kind of power Philomel has. The girl thought to get it at a time when it would already be imbued with divine power. But no one will give it to her now anyway. But we need to get it by any means necessary. When the girl got out of bed, she immediately collapsed and remembered that she was sick after all. That's also why she realized that now was not the time. She needs a better way. It's not enough for her to just be a good kid, because there are a lot of people who hate her. A detailed plan must be drawn up. The girl thought that then she would succeed. It was on this day for the fake little princess that the first day of the plan to save her own life came to fruition. When night came and Philomel had already fallen asleep, the Emperor was heading towards her room. The nanny who was following him said she would wake the girl up right away, but he told her not to. When he saw his daughter sleeping, he wondered what he was doing here. Eustace thought that if it wasn't for his assistant, he would have never gotten there. Well, looking at his daughter, he thought that apparently she was really sick. As he was about to stroke her head, he heard a whisper. "Father, I'm going to be a good child, so please don't kill me," the girl was saying. When the Emperor heard these words, he remembered passages from his childhood when he didn't understand why everyone wanted to kill him, and he didn't want to die. This memory frightened him. At that moment, Philomel took her father's finger and pressed it against her. It had happened to him before, though he had long since forgotten about it. The Emperor thought that it had not been a whim then, in the rain. He couldn't believe that she hadn't been living the permissive life of the Emperor's only child all this time, but was just frantically going around to draw attention to herself. Then he thought that all this time he had misunderstood her. In the morning, when the nurse came to the girl's house, she brought with her a huge golden fruit. Philomel asked if His Majesty had sent it to her. Nanny said she was surprised herself because some cold was causing him to squander such a treasure. Then the nanny asked if nothing had happened yesterday. The girl said nothing was wrong and asked, "Maybe she knows something?" Danya said that if nothing happened, then okay. But Philomel had the fruit of the world tree in her hands. The world tree is a divine tree that grows in the center of the continent. Its fruit is known as a miracle medicine that helps to restore strength. The girl had also heard that only a dozen of these fruits were delivered to the palace every year, so they simply wouldn't be used. Philomel, even then alone, could she have been given it. Then she thought that it must have been Pollen who had sent it in His Majesty's name. Then the girl said to convey to him her gratitude for the favor she had shown him. The stronghold was served along with the medicine. The polygraphic nanny asked if that was all. The girl was surprised and asked what else was needed. But the woman replied that there was nothing, and took the fetus from her, and also said that the Duke of Aberdeen has requested a visit. His Grace is not going to pay a visit. The nanny asked when it would be convenient for the princess and what time to schedule an appointment for him. The girl hesitated and said that if it was possible, she wouldn't mind this afternoon. After a while, Philomel gathered herself and went out for her meeting. She heard the Duke's voice asking Nazar what was wrong with his species. The Duke said, "Does the sun really want to show Her Majesty such a sad face?" He realizes that the boy is upset because he had to cancel a meeting with his friends. When the girl came to the door, a maid offered to help her, but Philomel said she would go in herself. After counting to 3, the girl opened the door and entered the room. After that, she bowed and said that she hadn't seen the Duke for a long time and also Nazar. The Duke greeted Her Majesty the Princess and asked how she was feeling. Nazar bowed as well. The boy said he couldn't stop worrying when he learned of her illness. Philomel said there was no need to worry because the cold was almost gone, and she thanked them for their excitement about her health. Then the Duke said he had to attend the meeting, so he must leave them, told Nazar to take care of Her Majesty. Nazar Ibridin is this beyond mature and kind boy, Philomel's fiance. The moment the girl glared at him, he asked, "Does she feel well? And if she's having a hard time, he'll call someone." But the girl said she was fine. After a brief silence, she asked if when she was fully recovered, they could go on a picnic together. The boy agreed. She asked where they would go. Nazar said wherever Her Highness wished. Philomel asked, "Where does he want to go?" The boy said that if with her, he was willing to go anywhere. Then the girl asked, "Is it okay to have a picnic in this weather, as he thinks?" Nazar said, thinking about it that way. Her Highness's words are true. Philomel said that then they could at least have an appetizer indoors, imagining as if they were at a picnic. Nazar said that would be quite good too. At that moment the girl realized that he just didn't want to do anything with her. They say there is a pianist who has become a hot topic of discussion in village circles. "It would be nice to send him here and hear him play," said the girl, and the lad of course agreed. Nazar only keeps the dialogue going with responses that utterly fail to express his own opinion. In the book, however, Nazar was eager to do everything, anticipating the slightest intention. Except it wasn't Philomel, it was Alencia. Philomel thought that this guy had never shared her feelings. Nazar said he would hire this performer when Her Majesty recovered, but the girl told him not to do that. She asked them to pretend that the conversation had never happened, and then thanked him for visiting her. Before she left, she said that he didn't have to come to see her so often in the future. "She's only taking up his time for no reason, so let him spend more of it with his friends now," Philomel said. Nazar stood up and said that if he had suddenly hurt her feelings in any way, he apologized. But the girl said it wasn't like that at all. She explained that they saw each other too often, so she thought there was no time to meet friends. She explained that they saw each other too often, so she thought she didn't have time to see her friends. When the guy said he understood everything, the girl wished him well and left. Philomel thought that from now on she would take Nazar's example and be favorable to everyone, but she would not open her heart to anyone. Under such circumstances, she would be able to get away with no regrets when she escaped. Philomel then went to class, and when she read, she said she was done and asked what was next. The teacher was very surprised and asked how she had already finished it, since she seemed to be just leafing through the pages. The girl said she had read everything properly, and if she didn't believe her, let her give the assignment to her to check. When the teacher gave her the test, Philomel finished it quickly. After checking the test, the teacher said that everything was correct, but that it was simply impossible. At that moment, the teacher realized that Her Majesty had changed, and very soon, such rumors began to spread throughout the palace. Once she was cured of her illness, she took to her studies diligently, and even started asking questions if she didn't understand something. The teachers were shocked when she did that. This change also affected his time with Nazar. Philomel suggested that he do his own thing at one of the meetings. She told him to bring himself something to do next time too. And at that moment, she was sitting and reading a book. Suddenly she was distracted from her reading and asked Nazar when the Battle of Celia began. The guy said that in the 132nd year of the imperial calendar. Philomel said Nazar was really smart. At this point, the guy thought, is she really mad at him lately? It seems like that to him all the time. And for some reason, it's not a good feeling for him. It's like he's all alone. A few days later, when the princess woke up, the maid accidentally dropped the cup. She began to apologize and explained that she had just accidentally stumbled. The maid didn't know what to do now, because it was a gift from the Duke of Ibridin's son. Philomel asked, "What is she doing? Why doesn't she clean that rug? Because it's going to get wet." After that, the girl told her to clean up everything on the floor, and then she could go. Just let her be careful not to hurt herself. The maid said she understood and would clean up quickly. She didn't know what was going on. Philomel said there was no need to rush because a person was more important than some cup. After this incident, the maid, when she came to the servants' room, she told everything to her co-workers. One of them said it couldn't be. The other one said that the emperor must have scolded her for the festival. Another said that even if she did, it wouldn't last long, no doubt, and things would soon be back to normal again. The other girl confirmed and said that it was true what not to say, but Her Highness was usually very sensitive and capricious. Martin said that no matter how it was, it would still be very quiet in the palace for a while. The next day, the maid, while cleaning the corridors, heard the teachers talking. The teacher said that Her Highness had passed the exam successfully this time too. Another day later, the gardener told Martin that Majesty had fallen, but said no displeasure. And also the next day, when the maid approached the cook to ask how much the princess had eaten, he replied that Her Majesty had eaten absolutely everything. The employees couldn't believe that the princess had actually grown up. Nanny was very happy about this improvement because it meant that she had not put her heart into her training all this time for nothing. If she did quit earlier because of her bad back, she'd definitely regret it. The maids praised the nanny. They said she was simply the best and incredible. And Philomel thought at that moment that these days were very hard. When the girl saw all this pandemonium, she thought she didn't want to go there, so she would take a detour. But then, suddenly the nanny noticed her and said how fortunate, for she was just about to look for her. Philomel asked what it was for. Then the girl said that His Majesty the Emperor had invited her to dinner. As the girl came to, she wondered why on earth he had done that. It wasn't like he just wanted to have a nice lunch with her all of a sudden. Then the Emperor said that he had heard that the girl was concentrating on her studies. He said it was very good. Philomel thanked him, but said she still had a long way to go. He said that her teachers couldn't get enough of her, and that this was the first time she'd ever been praised, so she didn't even realize it. Philomel said it was all thanks to His Majesty who appointed her outstanding teachers. The Emperor said that her speech had become more mature in the time they had not seen each other. The girl replied that it was time for her too, as a member of the imperial family, to behave with dignity. Justice told her to stay focused in the future as well, and asked how she was feeling. Philomel said that she was already fine thanks to the medicine sent by His Majesty. She thought she shouldn't relax, because it was nothing more than a condescension on his part. The Emperor said he was glad to hear it because her mother's health was also poor. Olya smiled and said that if she wanted something as encouragement, let her just say so. He would listen to her request. Philomel didn't expect the chance to fall sooner than she expected, but His Majesty is always extremely precise in his rewards and punishments. And even though she feels like it's too soon to ask for what she really needs right now, she said she doesn't want anything. It's enough for her already that he's noticed her progress. Justice said it was very modest. Yes, someone who would take the throne in the future should have at least a little greed. When the girl heard this, she thought, if it's like this, maybe I'll ask her after all. She thought about what she wanted to ask. After that, she turned to the Emperor and said that honestly, she wanted something. She had a request for him. When someone walked into the room, she wasn't really surprised. She thought it was Her Highness. But when she turned, the Count was before her, and he asked what fates he had come to her by. Pauline said His Highness ordered her to be retired. Until today, she had to take care of first Her Majesty the Empress, and after that Her Highness. So it was as if she had worked hard. Nanny didn't know what he meant, but the Count said that she would be compensated handsomely, so she would not be offended. At that moment, Philomel came into the room and thanked the nanny for everything. She also advised her not to overwork and to rest. Nanny was very angry when she heard she was being retired because she hadn't even thought about it before. Pauline said she's been suffering from lower back pain for a long time, and Her Highness personally told the Emperor about it. The girl said it wasn't all that serious and she could fulfill her duties, but Pauline told her to stop her work from today and take better care of her own health, and Her Highness would already find a capable maid. When Nanny asked that the matter be reconsidered, the girl thought it would be quicker to die and be born again than to reverse the Emperor's order. Suddenly Philomel heard the voice of the maids. They were asking what would happen to them if Nanny left. They would only have to try to work with the person behind the desk. They were sorry to see the nanny go, because they had worked so hard to get along with her. Philomel, as expected, would have to get rid of everyone else as well, because they would only get in the way. But still she has managed to change some things, and even if only a little, but the difference is becoming noticeable. It was not a bad start for the girl. A few days later, Pauline knocked on Philomel's door and asked if he could come in. When the girl replied that she could, it wasn't just him who entered the room. There was another man beside him, and she recognized him. It was the head maid who served Alencia. She said hello and said that it was an honor for their family to serve Her Highness. She said that if she could do something for the girl, then let her feel free to order her around. It was Countess Dell. The girl thought it was likely that a replacement had been found very quickly, but at the same time, they still brought a worthy person. She expressed her gratitude for the acquaintance and asked the Countess to take care of her in the future. Philomel thought it was even better, because with a man like that, she was bound to succeed. When Pauline first came with the Countess, she was surprised that he offered to take care of the princess, but he said there was simply no one better than the Countess, so they really hoped she would agree. Dell thought she was a complicated and sensitive child, plus the rumors about her left a lot to be desired. She wondered if she could handle it. Philomel thought it was necessary to make a good impression on her new employee from the start. As she and the Countess drank tea, she thought that apparently the rumors were lying. She wondered what the people who were spreading these rumors thought of themselves. Then suddenly the girl said that the Countess seemed to be very good at knowing what dresses were now in fashion. She asked if the Countess would like to look at her closet. She has a lot of beautiful clothes. Dell took that she would love to see it, and asked if the girl would show her. Philomel got excited and said that of course she would show. She asked if they could go there right away. The Countess agreed. Philomel then took her by the hand and led her away, saying that the Countess would be delighted when she saw it. And the Countess herself thought Her Highness was too much of an adult, but there were childish features in her. After a while the girl brought her to her closet and showed her dresses. Afterwards she asked if she liked them. Philomel walked over to one of the dresses and said that this was her favorite, and this one was sewn last spring. The Countess reflected that although all the clothes looked normal, the order and care of the closet was very poor. Not only was it creased, it wasn't organized by season. Even aristocratic maids don't make such mistakes. Philomel at this point picked up the blue dress and asked if it was really pretty. The Countess said it was beautiful. She then looked out of the window and saw the maids. She figured it wasn't just about clothes after all, and apparently she'd need a lot of basic maids on the estate too. Sometime later, the entire cast of the princess's maids changed as a result of an investigation initiated by the Countess. Not only was employee negligence uncovered, but also massive misappropriation of funds. After this, all the people involved, including the babysitter, were severely punished. And although the nanny who stole the most ended up with a forfeiture, rumor has it that she returned to the palace to cause a scandal, after which she was kicked away. As one of the new maids brushed the girl's hair, she said that Her Highness was worth seeing too. That woman was only given once, but she cried so much. But at that moment, the Countess came into the room and said it was not proper to say such a thing in front of Her Highness. The Countess thought that Nanny had been with her for so long that it must be unpleasant for the princess to hear such a thing. But the girl turned and said she was fine. Then the Countess said she would have a bed made for her. The girl thanked her, but Dell said she shouldn't thank her, because it was her job. Just as Philomel thought, Countess Dels understood everything. She was a decent, honorable person on whom Alencia had to rely. Yule, if it had been like in the book, that woman wouldn't have been there. But it was thanks to her that Philomel was able to get rid of the nanny and the maids. But it was still very early to relax. When the girl went to bed, she thought that she would let things go on and on. The next morning the Countess brought the bottle and told Philomel that this was what she had asked for. The girl took it and thanked her, but Dels asked what she needed it for. The girl said she was going to make tea with it and treat His Majesty to it. The Countess was very much surprised, and the girl explained that he also enjoyed alcohol sometimes. Philomel also said she had read in a book that mountain gymnema was good for hangovers. The Countess said that although gymnema was used as medicine, His Majesty would definitely be pleased. With what reverence the girl regards her parents. Then she asked if she could prepare a teapot and a cup. Philomel said to bring filtered paper as well. The Countess replied that she would be there soon and would bring everything. When the woman was out the door, Philomel opened the bottle and sniffed. The scent was not pleasant. As useful as it is for hangovers, you can't drink it that easily. But the girl thought of something she could do. She did a little searching, and thought it would be all right if she used the fruit of the world tree. Bitter mountain gymnema and the juice of the fruit of the world tree was just what the girl needed. Because if you mix these two ingredients, the bitterness goes away, and you get a healing tea that helps restore energy. Randomness, which was born out of the idea of mixing good with good, is bound to be beneficial to health. The book mentioned that it was Alencia who was the first to discover this effect, but Philomel thought she would live happily with that as it was, so let her make concessions to it. At this moment, the girl thought that after all, a real princess was really different. But then suddenly the Countess came into the room and said that she had brought everything. Then Philomel replied that she should put everything on the table. Still, Alencia has a very kind heart, and she would give this man to some guardian. But Philomel is not like that at all. She believes that a good thing should be given to those who have power. When the girl stirred the tea I tasted in the fold, I realized she had it all worked out, and all she had to do was take it to the Emperor. After a while, Pollen came into His Majesty's room and asked if he was still awake. He came closer and said it was time to get up. The Countess said for the Emperor to see who had come to see him. Eustace sat on the bed and asked his assistant to keep his voice down because he had a headache. At this moment, Philomel entered the room and asked His Majesty how he was feeling. When the Emperor saw his daughter, he was surprised and asked what she was doing in his room so early. Philomel said she thought he could use some mountain gymnema tea right now, and she told him to drink it. Pollen said that Her Highness had personally prepared it, and asked if such reverence for parents was unworthy of admiration. "Pass it under us," the girl said. "Even though it smells bad, it tastes good." The girl moved closer to him and then smelled a pungent odor. She wondered how much he had drunk after finishing lunch. The Emperor covered her mouth with his hand and told her to step back. The girl's hands were shaking and she realized she couldn't hold the tray. When the father saw this, he quickly snatched the tray from her hands, in order for the girl to move away as soon as possible. After that, he took a cup of tea and sipped it. Everyone in the room was in anticipation what he would say. As Eustace gulped down the tea, he said the flavor wasn't even bad. Philomel asked if it was true. It tasted good. All she had to do was add the juice from the fruit of the world tree, and the bitterness was gone immediately. When the Emperor heard this, he was very surprised. He asked which fruit she had added. The girl replied that it was the one he had given her. Justice said that he had given it to her to eat. Philomel saw that she was no longer ill, but that His Highness was often hungover. Pollen said that it seemed like he should cut down on his drinking, if only for the sake of the princess. Besides, if you drink like that for 10 years, you're bound to have health problems. When the Emperor heard this, he said it was too noisy. Pollen felt a little embarrassed. The girl thought that the Emperor was drinking a lot more than she thought. She couldn't even imagine that this had been going on for 10 years. It was also when Empress Isabella died and a baby girl was born. Philomel could not believe that he had been drinking ever since. But then suddenly, she thought that his wife was dead and his daughter was a fake. But she pushed the thought away and thought she was sympathizing with the wrong person. Suddenly the Emperor turned to his daughter and said that thanks to her his head had cleared a little. If she has any wish, let her say it. Philomel thought at that moment that everything had gone according to plan. She assumed that His Majesty would not let her go unrewarded this time. When she thought of what she would ask for, she told the Emperor about it. The next day she came to the garden and thought she had chosen the place well. During their walks together here, Philomel wants to show him that she is capable of becoming a worthy heiress. But she didn't realize when His Highness would come already. But suddenly, she heard a voice speaking to her. When the girl turned around, the boy said that only members of the imperial family could enter here. Philomel could realize who the guy was, asked why she was silent. Does she dare to ignore him? After that, he asked what kind of family she was from. The guy asked if she didn't know that even entering the place was already a felony, and it's worth reporting her to him, and she won't make excuses so easily. At that moment the girl thought he was too noisy. The girl didn't understand why he didn't even think about the fact that she might belong to the imperial family. Then she turned to the boy and asked him to speak a little quieter. Upon hearing this, the guy yelled at her and told her to shut up. But Philomel wasn't going to stand for it, and she said he was the one who needed to shut up here. She asked if maybe he was deaf. She said that he, Liam Elos, was the one who needed to shut up. The guy said she knew who he was and still dared to talk to him like that. Then the girl asked if he knew who she was. Liam couldn't answer her questions and looked away and said he was going to tell his mom everything now. But then suddenly, a woman and another boy came up to them. She turned to Liam and asked him what was wrong and if he had hurt himself. Liam's mom and brother approached the children. Philomel recognized the woman immediately. Her name was Marquise Elos. When the son tried to explain what had happened, Marquise turned her attention to him, said hello to the girl, and told her they hadn't seen each other in a while, and asked how she was doing. Sylvia Elos, formerly called Sylvia Balalop. She is Justice's half-sister, and the only member of the side branch of the imperial family left in the country. And the reason why she, the former princess, was still able to stay in the castle is because this woman was quick to side with the current emperor. Sylvia had 2 sons, so it was assumed that the older of the 2, Logan Elos, would take the place of the next emperor. It was said so because Philomel had neither divine powers, unnecessary for a ruler, nor qualities. The youngest of the brothers, Liam, is too young, so he just didn't get a chance to see Philomel at official events. Philomel thought, come on, Malash, that apparently this rude creature was really Liam. She'd only heard of him before. At this point, the boy said that this was the princess his mother had talked about. This was surprising to him, because he thought she was unassuming, just like his mother had said. When Philomel heard this, she realized what was being said about her behind her back. Logan suddenly spoke. He greeted Her Highness, the princess. He said he hoped her heart would forgive his brother's rudeness. But the guy said they had to go now because he and his family had come to take a walk. At this point, Philomel thought that when Alencia came, they would be left with nothing anyway. Liam told his brother to make this garden a playground when he becomes emperor, because the boy wants to play war with his friends here. Logan told his brother to shut up, because you can't just say words like that. The boy asked why that was. Philomel thought at that moment that she had heard everything, and he was already imagining himself in the emperor's shoes. And yet she would be better off just laughing about it now and forgetting it, because if she argues with them now, then after it's revealed that she's a fake, they might come to her with accusations. Logan said they would see each other next time and wished that the princess was healthy. But then suddenly Philomel turned to them and told them to wait, because they should say goodbye to her properly. The Marquise used to be a princess too, so did she really get the same treatment from the side branch representatives? The girl asked, but they all remained silent, and then Philomel asked, say she was wrong, and generally whether they were right to address her informally. Sylvia sighed, agreed, and said she would do as the girl wished. Then the girl said that Sylvia Elos welcomed Her Highness, Princess Philomel, and asked if such an address suited her, but the girl told her to bow. When Sylvia heard this, she was amazed, but Philomel kept backing away and told the girl to bow. The girl then asked if that wasn't how one should greet the official heir to the throne. Hearing that, Sylvia got even more angry. Philomel asked why she was reacting like that. Had she said something wrong? Philomel thought it was a shame. She must have once been a princess herself, and since there was no empress, all the high society revolved around her. You could turn a blind eye to her behavior, but Philomel isn't going to live like that because she's still a princess. But then suddenly Liam's voice came through. He told the girl not to lie because she was not the heir. His brother will be the next emperor. Philomel sighed and asked, does he even realize what he's saying right now? Liam said that of course he did, and asked her not to act arrogant. When the boy wanted to say something else, the emperor came up to them and said it was too noisy. Afterward he asked, what was the quarrel about? When Philomel saw him, she was astonished, but she immediately said that Liam Elos had now said that his brother would be the next emperor. Philomel asked if it was true, if he could move her, the first contender, and take the throne himself. Sylvia said it wasn't like that. Her son hadn't said anything like that. Logan confirmed this and said that Her Highness had just misunderstood. Then the emperor asked, does that mean the princess is lying? Sylvia said that's what happens sometimes, that kids resort to lying to get attention. But she added not to scold Her Highness too much, because children are all like that. Philomel thought that she wasn't lying after all, and realized she had to at least object to something. When she wanted to say something, the emperor looked at her. At that moment she thought, will he believe me? She has no proof? But she decided to give it a try, and said she was telling the truth. The girl didn't understand how to be, what to do. His Highness would be disappointed in her if he thought she had lied to him about her intention to take the throne, and he would be angry. After thinking it over, the girl told His Majesty that she had indeed heard all this, and she was not lying. The emperor sat down on his knee and put his hand to her cheek, telling her not to cry, and he trusted that she wasn't lying to him. Because if you accuse her of lying, you automatically accuse him of lying, because he heard it all too. When Logan heard this, he said that he had committed a sin that deserved death, and began to bow to the emperor. He said he'd made a mistake worrying about his unreasonable little brother. Liam asked his brother why he was acting that way, because that's what everyone said, that His Majesty had chosen him to be his heir. Sylvia told her son to be quiet. Can't he just stand still? Logan got up from his knees and hit his brother. Afterward, the boy cried and asked who he was to hit him in the first place. Logan said that neither he nor his parents had ever said such a thing to his younger brother. Sylvia confirmed his words and said that her son just had a rich imagination, and he was wrong. Philomel at this point thought she had just been called a liar. At this point, the Emperor spoke up and said that he had been careless, not thinking that a conspiracy would be brewing under his very nose. Afterward, he told Sylvia that he hadn't touched it until now, because it wasn't valuable enough to get his hands dirty on it. So the Emperor said that if she understood everything and didn't want to lose her head, then let her disappear from here with her children, because he wouldn't want to spill blood today. So the three of them bowed and left the garden. Soon they were kicked out altogether, removing their names from the imperial family registry and sealing their divine power. Because these people were never able to temper their pride, they were banished from secular society. But Philomel learned about all of this a little later. It was scary for the girl at that moment. He was so cold-blooded even by his own relatives. So what would happen to her? As the Emperor began to walk, he asked the girl if she wanted to walk. Philomel immediately thought of the walk and ran up to him. As they walked, the girl somehow got the feeling that His Majesty wasn't in such a bad mood anymore. When evening came, the Emperor said that the wind was getting cool. The girl asked him if he enjoyed the walk. The Emperor replied that not that he liked it, but since the insect that didn't know its place had been banished, he thought it was okay to come once in a while. The girl asked if maybe they could take a walk together from time to time. The Emperor said it wouldn't be fun with him, but Philomel thought she would enjoy it anyway. When the Emperor thought about it, the girl thought it was something new. He didn't refuse her right away. She thought, "By will be interesting, you didn't mean something bad, did you?" But then suddenly the Emperor said that he agreed. The girl was very happy about it. After calming down a bit, she bowed and thanked him for listening to her request. Seeing this, the Emperor said that she could behave as usual. The girl asked him what he meant. Eustace turned away and said it was okay. Let her do as she pleased. At this moment, she had a feeling as if a soft wind had blown, and the ice on the Emperor's heart began to melt. The next morning, Philomel again brought healing tea for the Emperor. After coughing a little, Pollen tried to wake the Emperor. But when he failed the first time, he shouted with all his might. Justice sat down on the bed and asked, "What again?" Philomel walked over to him and wished His Majesty good morning. And from that day on, as soon as His Majesty was drunk, the next morning the girl would come to his bedroom with her tea. Due to the fact that Count Poland wanted to wean the Emperor from this habit, she easily got the information she needed from him. Though the Earl was constantly bestowed with a piercing glance at the teacup, it always ended up empty. On this day, the little girl asked if they could go for a walk today because she really wanted to. Pollen said His Majesty's schedule is free until lunchtime today. Eustace said they had even specifically picked a day for it, so you didn't have to ask. Sighing, he told his daughter that so-and-so could take a little walk before work. When they went out for their walk, Philomel couldn't believe she had succeeded in doing it today as well. These are the kind of conversations that will help bring out her strengths from time to time. Philomel said her writing teacher praised her yesterday, and said she was the most outstanding of his students. The Emperor replied that it was very good. Then the girl said that he must have said that because she was a princess. But Eustace replied that that man was also his teacher, and he was clearly not the type who would flatter. Even though the girl mentioned it on purpose, this reaction from His Majesty made her feel a little uncomfortable. When she decided to get closer to him, she accidentally tripped and fell. Philomel thought that one shouldn't cry over something like this. Otherwise one would look pathetic in His Majesty's eyes. The Emperor asked if she was all right. Then the girl replied that she was fine and made a strained smile. She told him to ignore him, and they went on their way. She thought she was all right and could go, but suddenly the girl felt the ground slipping away from under her feet. When she looked down, she realized that the Emperor had lifted her up in his arms. Philomel tried to resist, but he told her not to move. After that, he tried different positions to carry her. The girl thought she was somehow embarrassed, and said she didn't have to do that at all. But Justice said that only the imperial family was allowed to enter this garden, so there was no one else to carry it. Philomel said that it was hard for him. The Emperor was very surprised and asked if he looked half dead. He said that even if she was uncomfortable, she could bear it. Afterwards said that if she didn't like it that much, she could sleep. Philomel said it was fine, and she thought to herself at that moment, very firmly uncomfortable and awkward, yet she felt so warm. When they returned to the manor, they were met by the Countess. She saw the sleeping girl and said she was very tired, but she replied that it was not surprising because the girl gets up early to go to him in the morning. Dell said, "Apparently she's very eager to bring tea. I'm right in time for the Emperor's awakening." Smiling, the Countess said that she had heard that Her Majesty Isabella also liked walks. She enjoyed looking at the flowers. As expected, Her Highness looked a lot like the former Empress. The Countess said it was worth a look, if only to see how she gathered her strength in the mornings before her walk with His Majesty. The Emperor said that Isabella used to look at the scenery around her while walking. The one who watched his companion's face more was him. He stroked the girl's hair and said that this child also watches faces. The Emperor replied that perhaps she resembled him far more than Isabella. The Countess replied that perhaps she was. After that she smiled sweetly. Time flew fast like an arrow, and here was Philomel's 10th birthday. The girl walked over to the bookshelf and thought that this seemed to be the book she never got to read last time. As she sat down at the table, Nazar asked if maybe she didn't like him. The girl was surprised and said it wasn't like that. Nazar put the book aside and said then maybe she had heard what she and her father had talked about that time. Because from that moment on, Her Highness stopped enjoying spending time with him. Philomel didn't even know what to say to that, because she had actually heard it all that time. At that moment, Nazar got up from the table. After that, he got down on his knee and apologized. Philomel asked him to get up, but the boy refused. He said he would beg her forgiveness until her mood improved. Philomel said he didn't need to apologize to her. It's not like he said anything bad to her. She was the one who overheard them. Nazar said that even the fact that he was able to allow such thoughts was already a problem. Philomel had no way of knowing what she should do about it. It was all too complicated. Philomel still remembers that day, the day of her first meeting with Nazar, and the moment their eyes met. Then she fell in love with him at first sight. She liked the groom she had only heard about even more than the girl could have imagined. Since then, she always looked forward to seeing him. She used to ask him to stay with her for longer periods of time. She liked the good-natured attitude she couldn't get from her parents. He saw her not as a princess, but as herself, and it seemed as if he and she shared a common sentiment. Philomel was incredibly happy that her fiancé turned out to be this particular boy. She doesn't even realize that the whole relationship is just fake. Philomel told Nazar to get up already. It's not his fault. No one can control the heart at will. The girl thought that even though he didn't love her in the book, there was nothing she could do about it. She can't hate Nazar. The boy said that he had to control even his heart, so allowing himself to even feel such a thing was undoubtedly his mistake. There were rumors of the Duke of Ibriden's cruelty in matters of instruction. Now that the heiress is also receiving lessons, she finally seems to be able to understand how hard it was for Nazar. The boy said that if he had any other unworthy traits besides that, he asked that she tell him so. He's a man born to take care of Her Highness, so just by telling her, he'll immediately correct himself. Philomel asked why he should be the one to take care of her. After all, Nazar is first and foremost Nazar. Well, his father had told him that he should always have that mindset when taking care of Her Highness. The girl couldn't understand what the Duke had done to his son. If this keeps up, he might hate the girl once he learns the truth. After pondering this, she gave him a hand and asked him to take a seat, and repeated after her. "I am an important person," said the girl. When the boy repeated, she continued, "I am not someone who was born for someone else." Nazar repeated those words as well. "And lastly, I will live my life as my heart dictates," said Philomel. As he struggled to utter these words, the girl said, "Let me have it my way from now on." One day Nazar will meet Alencia, and even though she won't be there for him then, he wishes he could live his life. The boy thanked Her Highness for taking care of him. The girl said she didn't have to, and that was fine. Perhaps it was the slightly more comfortable atmosphere, but that night was clearly different from the others. When they were eating dinner, the girl asked, "What kind of food does Nazar like?" The boy replied that if he had to choose, he probably liked beefsteak the best. Philomel said that the steaks are really good. I really like them too. She then asked what his future plans were, beyond what the Duke had outlined. The boy said that, to be honest, he was a little embarrassed, of course, but he would like to become a brave warrior. Not the main character of the book. I am not the son of the Duke of Ibriden, but just an ordinary boy, Nazar. Philomel only seemed to recognize something about him just now. She thought that just talking to him like this, just talking to him was quite enough. She wondered if she and Nazar had been comfortable with each other like this from the beginning. Would she be able to be more honest with him? In the evening, when Nazar came out in the carriage, he said it was time for him to go home. When the girl looked at him, she didn't understand why he made that face, and wondered if he had something to say to her. But Nazar said he didn't want anything. Philomel, in parting, said that if the Duke suddenly started telling him something different from her words again, let him just ignore it. The boy replied that he would try. Then Philomel said that if he said anything at all unacceptable, let him tell her at once, and she would scold him properly. It's not a joke, she could really scold him. The girl when Nazar laughed. The guy said that when that happens, he'll be sure to ask her to take care of it. She smiled and said they would see him next time. In the evening, when she returned to her room, she looked at the book and thought that she had already memorized all the contents. Then suddenly she thought, can anything else happen? But she was brave enough to throw the book into the fire. After a while, she looked to see if the book had burned. When only ashes remained, she thought that she had encrypted the most important thing just in case, and hidden it safely. It's perfect now. But then a strange sound came from the fireplace. When she turned around, she couldn't believe her eyes, because right in front of her lay one book that had just been burned. It was unharmed. The next day she met with the court wizard, Humphrey. They had tea together. The man asked what she was interested in. Philomel asked if he knew everything about magic. Humphrey replied that he couldn't say he knew everything, but dare boast that he is far from the last place in the Imperial Magic Research Center, and he had worked at the Tower of Magicians in the past. Philomel was pleased and said he was very distinguished, and she too had done a little magic. When he asked what magic she was reading about, the girl said about a pumpkin carriage that flies, pour in an arc, or becoming smaller than a flower. She asked if the author of the book had exaggerated. When Humphrey hesitated, the girl thought, so he wouldn't answer her so seriously. She already knew the answer. The wizard said that if you use the theory of decay and restructuring. The girl interrupted and asked, so it could not become possible even in the future.